Hi there. Welcome, Karen.
Thank you. So excited to be here this morning.
Awesome. Well, we are going to have a conversation about how art and creativity can help adults with ADHD and can help mental health in general as well. So, I asked you to be here because I know you are an expert in this area and such a passionate artistic human. So, I'm so excited about our conversation. I'll go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Amber, and I am an ADHD coach and educator focused on helping adults with ADHD specifically through a strength-based and creative approach. And and I want to ask you, Karen, would you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yes, like I said, I was delighted to be asked. Anything on creativity just lights me up. My name is Karen Corona, and I'm a licensed therapist in Portland, Oregon. And I work in that capacity with women around trauma resolution and trauma-based substance abuse issues. And as a wellness and recovery coach, I bring creativity into wellness, helping women embrace that part of themselves really for radiant living, to just kind of be free, whether or not it's free from addiction or emotional burdens that we're carrying. And so the common thread in both of my work capacities, both as a therapist and a coach, is awakening the creative spirit and how much that can enliven us.
Yes, and that I completely agree with that. And it is vital to just feeling alive for me too. So let's jump into a conversation a little bit about. So, both of us are creative humans, it sounds like, and we've worked with individuals who have maybe lost that creative side or maybe lost things along the way because of whether it's ADHD struggles or, like you were saying, addiction, trauma. So, how have you used art and creativity with the clients that you work with? And specifically, if you've had clients with ADHD, like how has art and creativity helped individuals with like impulsivity or difficulty concentrating? Um, those kind of symptoms that often go along with ADHD.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, in terms of my work with clients, I started really basic. A lot of us have had what I call art injuries along the way. A comment by a teacher, like, well, that's kind of okay, that actually stick with us. And I believe we're all born with a creative spirit and artistic kind of capacities to express ourselves in that way. But like you said, often it gets lost along the way. And so, to have it not be threatening, because sometimes it can feel that way with clients, it's just using basic. I start with my favorite oil pastels, which is a portfolio. They're on Amazon, and they go on really just delightfully. You can see all the bright colors.
It's
So
kind
this
of like crayons, but with more oil, right?
exactly. So it's just like butter on the page. And so clients really like it when they start to use it. And so one of the ways I start, like if we're working around anxiety or emotional overwhelm or difficulty even focusing, um, we kind of locate where is that in the body? And like if it's anxiety, I'm feeling it here in my stomach. Okay, and then can they visualize in shape or color, not a detailed necessarily image that we're going to draw, but just shape and color. And so like if I would do an example with a client, here's my anxiety spiral.
Oh,
And then you can move from there, like what would it need to kind of feel calmer? If it was speaking to me, I am one who gets out of control and has too many creative ideas all at once and gets easily overwhelmed. And then we can kind of work towards what helps my anxiety spiral to calm down. And so you kind of just move it through the body level on a sensory level to imagery, and you kind of can go to language.
yeah, and I think that process too really helps. A lot of people are like, I'm not an artist, I can't draw, and there's a lot of walls that they put up instantly to just kind of say, I can't do this. But you make it such a simple process. Like, let's use these adult crayons. Let's use these oil pastels that just are so fun to work with. Let's do something that doesn't have to be perfect. And let's talk about where it is in your body. And like it's almost like you have a dialogue with the artwork and with the human that you're working with at the same time.
Exactly, exactly. And I appreciate what you just said, like there are often walls and it either feels like it's kind of almost infantilizing or how is this going to help me like
Mhm.
drawing a picture or it's
Yeah.
there's art, yeah,
Mhm.
trauma. And so I try and really have to kind of bridge it in. Yeah, this is a playful, it's imagery and color and we can work with it and have a dialogue.
Yeah, that's great. So you use oil pastels. It sounds like that's your go-to first kind of thing. How else, what other kind of art processes do you use sometimes with people who are having difficulty with, like ADHD does involve a lot of difficulty with emotional regulation. It is
Yeah.
one of those top things that a lot of adults with ADHD and children with ADHD have. So what other processes or other things have you used?
Yeah, I'll talk about a few others. Like my creative ideas are like going off. There's so many, but like to start with, one could be just the simple kind of adult coloring books. And you can do this really mindfully in terms of just calming the nervous system. There's ones that you can paint that are mandalas, and so you can kind of just color in. It's not about creating a masterpiece, but or there's so many wonderful adult coloring books, and that's really simple. You don't have to be thinking, I'm creating something for a product. It's about the process and doing it mindfully. So I like that one a lot and listening to some like 417 hertz music that can be regulating while
Mhm.
mindfully doing some coloring, and that can calm the nervous system.
Mhm.
That's that's one.
Yes, yes. And that 417 hertz music, is that something that can be found on YouTube or what is that again?
Yes, so that can be found. I just use it on YouTube, and it's a frequency to the ear that tends to be almost like a heartbeat, and so it tends to be soothing. And so, and there, of course, there's other kind of regulating kind of instrumental music, but that one can be a good one to look up on YouTube. Yeah,
And
yeah.
I just want to speak to that for a second. So, what I know about you, Karen, is that you are an expressive artist, and or you have your certification or a degree in expressive arts, and so you're incorporating music and art. And sometimes people think of those as two separate things, but in your opinion, is music, art, and movement all under the same umbrella?
It is, and that's a really neat distinction. So I'm not an art therapist. I'm trained in expressive arts therapy. And so that's a full umbrella. That can be music,
Mhm.
movement, using gesture. What does the anxiety look like? Like, okay, what does it need to calm? So that's just using body. So, and then poetry, doing using words, journaling. So that's all under the umbrella. And then creative expression of expressive arts or expressive arts therapy. So there's a lot of modalities that we can kind of pull from that are body based and creative based that really can promote wellness and balance in ourselves.
Yeah. And just from my own personal experience as an adult with ADHD myself, I have noticed like when I dance, when I move, I'm not a musician. I don't call myself that, but when I attempt to play musical instruments or when I paint, like all of those things help me focus. They help me be mindful of what my body is doing. Like if I'm hitting a drum, I'm not, my mind isn't racing. I'm focusing on the rhythm. Or
Yeah.
if I'm painting, my mind isn't racing because I'm focusing on the color and how, if I'm doing oil pastels, the feeling of it gliding across the paper. All of those are very like mindful and soothing body, sensory based soothing things. So, like you were saying.
Yeah, and there's I can get a little bit nerdy about all the like research on, like even on concentration or executive functioning when we are doing something creative or just kind of doing some scribble drawing or doing some collage or mindful coloring, movement, that can all increase blood flow to the frontal cortex, which increases brain functioning and the talking between the right and left hemispheres. And that is shown to increase dopamine.
Mhm.
And dopamine, we know, is that good, feel good kind of natural way to kind of promote well-being. And
Mhm.
so, and it's also regulating, a little bit of my story is trauma based, and I am in recovery. And so anything I can do to kind of regulate my emotions, especially when I'm triggered, regulate my nervous system has been key. And I have found that one of the biggest gifts is creative arts and expressive arts for helping me in my trauma and recovery story.
Yeah, me too. I think we share that in common for sure. And thank you for sharing a little bit more about yourself because yeah, we're not only helpers, but we ourselves are kind of on our own journey and path of expressing ourselves. So it's not just us having a conversation about what other people should be doing. It's what we've incorporated and what you've incorporated into your life to kind of help your own soul and your own nervous system too.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, yeah. My own
Well,
journey.
yeah, and it's a journey for sure.
Yep.
So,
Mhm.
so with your work with individuals, what have you noticed really helps people go deeper with the arts and with creativity? Is there something specific, like different ideas that you have or tools that you use? We've talked about a few, but anything else that can help with that deeper work?
Yeah. One tool, it's a creative tool. It's called Soul Collage. And basically, Soul Collage is a creative tool for transformation. It was developed by a psychotherapist in the 80s. Sina Frost is the birth mother of it. And it's really a lovely way just to find images that call to you, and we can kind of depict different parts of our personality or soul. But then it's actually kind of sometimes we get a message in it, right? There's, something kind of comes to, um, we might have an emotional blind spot about something. And so it's like, oh, there it is. That's the message. And so some soul collage are just on these 3x5 cards and just, finding collage images that speak to you. This one is a labyrinth. And I kind of think of that one as, my practice of stand in the way of beauty each day, find beauty in each day. But that can also be a really wonderful way to bring things deeper. And I do bring this into my work with clients.
Mhm.
This is one called The Light Within.
Mhm. Love it.
And of course, the butterfly representing transformation. So I think there's ways that the creative arts can move things deeper in our own personal transformation journey.
Mhm.
It can bring the unconscious more conscious, so we're more self-aware.
Mhm.
It can, like I mentioned, those emotional blind spots. We can be like, oh,
Mhm.
that's what's about this relational pattern. And I want to shift that. I don't want to keep repeating that.
Mhm.
Or it can be a way of processing emotions. We know that the creative arts and kind of putting things out there, it's like externalizing the inner landscape. And so that then you have it external. How do you process it? And we know that the arts can decrease depression,
Mhm.
anxiety, emotional overwhelm, and be really a powerful tool in trauma resolution.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, that's a way to bring it deeper.
I'm going to share a personal experience and relate it to what you're saying. So I used to work at a methadone clinic and I was in charge of working with the moms, so women who were having babies while still on methadone. And so we did art processes sometimes in our groups, and several of them were like, what's the point of this? Why am I doing this? And they would start using collage materials like what you said, like cutting out images that just, I don't know, that they liked, like, oh, this is kind of pretty. And then once they start putting them together, you start realizing like, this is actually like meaningful. This means something to me more than just it's pretty. It's something that kind of relates to sometimes it would relate to the stress that they were going through in their life. And sometimes we would have specific directives like, show me what you want your life to look like. And they would pick images and then talk about it. So I really like that process of collaging, and I wish magazines were more popular these days. I know everything's digital, but I still use junk mail. I use magazines from libraries. Yeah.
Yeah, you can become a creative paper hoarder. Like that's like me. And so, in terms of images, because collage is one of my favorite mediums, and I appreciate what you just shared. Um, Two things. One is by Catherine Anderson. She's a soul collage photographer, but if you want some neat imagery, go on to her website and I mean, just beautiful imagery that can be used. She does photography for soul collage.
Okay.
Um, and then another great magazine, if you're into collage with words and art, is by Somerset Studios. And they do an art journaling one, and then you can find just these wonderful images to use in collage. Um, but you're right. I really, that's what I've been drawn to in terms of one of my processes. And currently I'm doing volunteering with women at a day shelter and women and children and doing a soul collage group.
Mhm.
And what comes out of there in terms of what women create and the processes and the struggles that they're currently going through
Mhm.
um, is so meaningful. So they find a lot of joy in it, but it also has so much meaning.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it's vital too, especially coming back to adults with ADHD. Um, the brain is very busy. The brain is busy, the world is busy, everything's busy, busy, busy. And if you can slow down enough to take time to collage something, create something, it puts you more in touch with you and what's really important to you. And then it can kind of help guide you instead of always being busy. It can give you guidance in your life of like, what do you really want out of your life? What's really important to you? And when we can find that, then it like a lot of people's anxiety and depression seems to get better when they have a purposeful, meaningful, like goal in their life.
Yes. And about the busy mind with ADHD and just kind of creative ideas, a lot of people with individuals with ADHD are very creative, and but there's a lot of ideas or busyness. And when we get into it's called the flow, when we get into a creative flow, it does help regulate the nervous system, but it also is calming to the mind.
Mhm.
So all that busyness of the mind can be calmed just by getting into a creative arts practice.
Yeah, yeah, we can get out of that fight or flight, like fear-based mentality that we can get stuck in a lot, unfortunately, and we
Yeah.
can get into that flow, like what you're talking about. And it, like, I have heard it said a number of different ways: your zone of creativity, your flow, your genius zone, whatever
Yes.
you want to call it. It really, I love being in that zone. I remember drawing when I was in high school, and like I would be drawing and for like an hour, and I was like sweating because I was just in this flow, and like I was generating heat and creativity and drawing, and I just like after I drew I was like, wow, I kind of lost track of time, and I lost track of like other things because it was me and that drawing that I was working on.
Yeah, that so often happens for me. I was in an art mixed media art class in Portland, Oregon last night, and it was 3 hours. And I was like, it's 9:30, the class is already over. And I was just in that flow, right? Like we lose track of time. It's an immersion experience, but that can be very regulating. Yeah.
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 And it can be, there's a term out there called hyperfocus that a lot of adults with ADHD can get into, kind of a hyperfocus zone. And that's not a bad thing. That can be a very positive thing to like if you're creating and going and you're in that zone. It sometimes is helpful though. Like you said, it's 9:30. So you had a time limit on it. Like you set a time for your class. And I recommend that for a lot of the individuals that I work with that are creative too. Like set a time limit. It's okay. I know time is kind of the bad guy for a lot of adults with ADHD, or the bad, I don't like time. It's evil. But setting a time limit so that you can still be creative and do things that, the dishes, the laundry, and all those other things.
Yes. Yeah. And I do that with my practice, like if, getting into kind of a habit with creativity and setting like I do like 20 to 30 minutes in the morning, right? Like creating a time limit because sometimes, yeah, I can kind of get into that zone and then I'm late for things, or sometimes I feel so overwhelmed, there's too much to do. But it's like, you know what? I can take 20 minutes to do some art. So the timer thing actually can really work
Mhm.
uh, as a tool for you in this capacity.
Yeah, yeah. It doesn't have to be a schedule. It doesn't have to be a rigid schedule, but it can be a limited amount of time, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, an hour, whatever you choose. And
Yeah.
so I love that you create that habit in your life. And I want to step back just for a second. I want to talk more about habits of creativity, but I also want to step back and talk about how sometimes art can be considered like it has to be pretty or it has to be a finished product. Um, and one thing that I think we've talked about before is how it's more of a tool for expressing yourself. Like if you can use art as a way to express yourself and not get caught up in it being having to be pretty, like sometimes that's where the real like the juicy work, the healing work, the good work happens. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely. And I think we're talking too about there's process versus product. And so, process with what we're talking about with expressive arts or art therapy or using creativity to express emotions or regulate, that all is often about process. We're not trying to create a masterpiece. And in fact, my art teacher says at the beginning, we're going to just all agree that we're not creating masterpieces here. This is about process. We see what emerges. And sometimes the shadow parts of ourselves emerge with black and red, and it's not pretty, but we're using it for process. And so I think that's an important distinction, versus learning certain watercolor techniques or becoming a mixed media artist and kind of learning a skill. So that's very different than process. And you can do one, other, or do both, right? But process versus product. Um, yeah, and allowing what emerges is a lot of the work, right? Like that shadow part, the part where that we might not want, or a part of ourselves that we're working on, right? Like for me, perfectionism or control, or it's like, oh, that showed up there. Okay, how else can I work with my part that likes to be controlling?
Yeah. And I work with a lot of adults who feel kind of ashamed
Mhm.
about not being able to do things just like everybody else, in the neurotypical way. And a lot of people haven't embraced the strengths of their creativity and the strengths of their ADHD because they're ashamed of it. And so that shadow work can also help, like when you're expressing it and it's not pretty and it's kind of like just ugly, but you're getting emotions out, like you can actually help really push through some of that shame and process some of that shame creatively, whether it's oil pastels, collage, whatever. And and
Yeah.
some of that stuff I don't hold on to those kind of pieces sometimes. Like I just need to like get it out, scribble it, draw it, whatever, and get it out of my head, get those emotions out of my heart. And then like that piece of artwork isn't valuable anymore. I sometimes just toss it because I'm like, okay, that was an experience and I'm done with that experience.
Yeah, it served its purpose to get out like what the inner feelings were, to get it out. And sometimes I've tore up artwork or just got
Mhm.
rid of it, or even done a little bit of burning. Like, how do I release? Because it is about the process. Um, and there was one other thought I had about that, but oh, the shame piece. Yeah, I mean, I work with women with trauma, and so, we often have faulty beliefs about our worth, which trauma often promotes,
Mhm.
and shame can be very thick. And so, working through the shame, the creative arts or expressing something can be a really powerful tool to be released from the emotional burden of shame.
Mhm.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it kind of is a stepping stone too, I think of like you get to express things, get it out, process through difficult emotions, and then you also build confidence because you're doing things that you wouldn't normally do, like you're using art materials or you're making things. And it's kind of a stepping stone of maybe eventually learning more techniques and maybe learning a type of art that is beautiful and that you find fun, but it doesn't always have to be that product like what you're saying.
Yeah, yeah. But I do think there can be like a sense of like, oh, this was kind of fun or creative, and it doesn't feel so scary, or there can be that sense of mastery, not in learning a technique, but it's like, I don't feel, threatened by my colors, right? Like it's like I can just grab one and gosh, I'm feeling a lot of anger and irritability today. What is that? I just need to get it out on paper. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, my last thought about that is that with people that with the individuals that I work with ADHD, is sometimes they just feel stuck. They feel stuck, and emotions are very hard because emotions are extreme emotions sometimes. And so it kind of, art can teach people to be okay with their emotions, to sit with them. Like through that expressive process, you're actually sitting with your emotions and also being okay with anger, being okay with the fact that you might feel ashamed of some things, or being okay. So it, to me, that's valuable. We're not always pushing things away or stuffing emotions down. We're sitting with our emotions and learning how to be okay with them.
Yeah. And so often we can get in that place of shutting down our emotions or not knowing what we're feeling because we're kind of cut off and kind of so in a different cut off from our body or our emotions. We're such in the cerebral kind of intellectual. So you're right. It can be helpful with that. And yeah, to kind of to process kind of what's happening emotionally. I like to, when with clients or just individuals, it can be really helpful to keep what's called a scribble mood journal.
Hmm.
So every day you're just taking, okay, checking in with yourself. What am I feeling? Well, I'm feeling a little bit, I'm calm, but I also feel a little twinge of anxiety and stress. Just do a scribble drawing. What color and shape?
Mhm.
And then if you want to take it a step further, if it's a scribble drawing, you can actually use that as an outline for coloring it in mindfully. And
Mhm.
on the back of it, you would just note what the 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 feelings are. And then you can look at patterns, and so because you have the tracking as a visual mood log. That one I like a lot when we're trying to get in touch with what are our emotional patterns, what's getting triggered. And so that one is one of my favorite ones. I call it a scribble mood visual journal.
Scribble mood visual journal. I love it. Yes, it's hard
Yeah.
to identify those emotions. We just sometimes know that we don't feel good. We feel icky. We feel discomfort. So yeah, it helps even as adults, especially adults with any kind of challenging emotions. That can be super helpful. I love that.
Yeah. And really noticing patterns. It's like, oh, every day after work when I'm doing my scribble drawing, I'm feeling like this agitation and stress. So then it's like, okay, what could I bring in as a transition from work to home life that would help me to get more regulated so it's the anger or irritability is not leaking out sideways, right? Um,
And we're not bringing home our anger and irritabilities. Yes.
yeah. So there's a lot of ways to use the visual kind of scribble mood stuff. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, you've offered so many great ideas and just insights already. I'm curious, how do you, so you mentioned earlier about like you do a journal yourself each day. What would you say is your habit of creativity, or how do you help people create a habit of creativity?
Okay, so the habit of creativity, I like to just kind of prioritize holistic wellness. So, like, what does it look like in body, mind, and soul? So, for my emotional health, that is a creative process and journaling. And so, I call them my wellness rhythms, and I identify one wellness rhythm for physical, a wellness rhythm for emotional, spiritual, that kind of thing. And so, for developing a habit, it's prioritizing that creativity is really important to my emotional health. So first of all, it's prioritizing. And then it's figuring out kind of when's the best time of day. After work for me, I am spent, and really getting into a creative habit is not the time. So I'm a morning person. So I usually find my rhythm then and starting to create a pattern and a habit out of creativity that way.
Cool, cool. So you start your mornings with kind of that value of creativity is going to help set my day off right, basically.
Yes. I kind of do a little bit of movement. I listen to some music. I do morning pages with Julia Cameron in terms of some journaling. And then I do a little bit of creativity. And for me, that looks like, it does usually look like doing some play in my art journal. And you can find so many ideas about art journaling on YouTube or Pinterest and different ideas. Often I'll do a soul collage card like I shared with you.
Mhm.
And then sometimes it's just doing mixed media collage and pasting down images and then maybe using some oil pastels and kind
Mhm.
of just creating in that way.
Very cool, very cool. And your journal looks beautiful. I want to like peek into it and see. You mentioned
Yeah.
a couple of things there that I just want to clarify. So, morning pages, and I know about this just because I read the book, but Julia Cameron wrote a book. What is the title again?
The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron.
Mhm. And then she recommends each day, starting out your day with writing for 30 minutes or writing 3 pages. I forget what it is.
Writing 3 pages and just free associate writing, right? Like whatever comes to your mind, you
Something
just
about.
get it out. It's kind
Yeah.
of like a thought and emotions download. There it is.
Okay.
Yeah,
Cool. So you do
yeah.
that, and then you also incorporate art or maybe a soul collage, and just it doesn't have to be the same every day. You can switch it up and make it fun.
Yes, yeah. So soul collage, art journaling, and another kind of process-based creative process is called intuitive painting. And this is just putting paint on paper.
Mhm.
And there's a book that I recommend to introduce you. It's by Stuart Kubley and Michelle Cassou,
Mhm.
Cassou, Life, Paint, and Passion.
Ooh, I already love the cover. It's pretty.
Yes, so this is like an intuitive painting. It's like just painting for process, not about learning technique.
Mhm.
It's just seeing what comes from the paintbrush and flows. And so that process you could look into is called intuitive or process painting, which is another wonderful way to bring creativity into your life.
Cool. I love it. So many ideas. I am a little different than you. My mornings are, I am not a morning person. I am a peak creativity 9, 10, 11 p.m. kind of person. That's when my creative juices flow, basically.
Yes.
So, but throughout the day, I create a habit of creativity by just doodling. Like when I am working through the day, I doodle, I draw, write down ideas. If I have ideas for things I want to create, I keep a notebook of the things, or it's not a notebook, it's actually a list on my phone. And that way that I can come back to those beautiful ideas that I have, because I have a lot of ideas. Not
Yeah.
all of them see the paintbrush, but I have a lot of ideas. And it is that intuitive painting, like what you're describing and what that book does. I use that a lot for myself too. It's so much pressure to sometimes start a painting or start something. But if you can just start like finger painting, doing things that just put color on the paper and then see where it goes. Some days it turns out not so cute. So you let it dry and paint over it the next day.
Yeah, that's the wonderful thing. You can put another layer and cover it. Yeah.
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 One of the biggest things, so task initiation is a big thing for adults with ADHD, it's kind of like get stuck before you even start, because the task, like sometimes creating something can seem like so overwhelming that you just don't even start. But what you're describing and what I've also do for myself and try to emphasize with other people is baby steps. Start start little, start messy. It's okay to be messy. Start messy, have fun with it, and just baby steps, layers and of things. And if you don't like it, hey, that's okay. Throw it away. Start over with something new if you can, if it's on paper, or paint over if it's on a canvas.
Yeah, I think with task initiation or getting task kind of stuckness, I think, yeah, just getting like a sketchbook, doing a scribble drawing, just setting the timer for 10 minutes, doing kind of scribbles as a start,
Yes.
just getting color down, and you might take 2 colors. And then all you might do that morning is start to color in kind of the different, so it's like the blank page can be a little bit daunting, unlike especially if there's what did you call it? Task kind of.
Like difficulties with task initiation. So it's a task
Yeah.
paralysis is actually sometimes what it's called. Yeah.
So just putting some colors in paint or oil pastels, whatever colors you have as a way to kind of jump over that getting frozen part, or in paralysis. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a beautiful lesson for adults with ADHD as well as a life lesson because we all get stuck sometimes, whether we have ADHD or a trauma, addiction, recovery, sometimes we feel stuck where we are and we want to change. And so in between stuck and where we want to change is just starting, just starting something. And sometimes you don't know where it's going, but just starting always helps.
Yes, well said. I love that. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Sometimes people might want to work with someone to help them with their creativity and help them get unstuck. So I want to ask if people want to get in touch with you, because like you're passionate about this. I think people are going to be like, oh, I want to work with her. So how do they get in touch with you? What's your website or social medias?
Yeah, I think the best way, I have two different websites. One for my therapy is my name, Karen Corona, LCSW, which I think you'll put in the information
Down below
below.
the YouTube.
It'll be down below. And then my other one is very easy. It's my creativity wellness coaching, and that is karencorona.com. And on Instagram, I'm mainly on Instagram, and that was as easy as well. It's Karen Corona LLC at Karen Corona. And so those are the best ways to get in touch, and would love any interested in bringing more creativity into your life in the form of wellness in our body, mind, and soul. So
Thank you so much for this conversation. It has been a pleasure.